20. There you go. And it says that we're live.
Yeah, let's just start put the sign up, Leanne, in case we are live. All right, I think we're gonna hope and assume that we are live for our Conquer Journey video, or whatever we're doing here this morning, our Conquer Journey FaceTime. You can tell it's 7 o'clock in the morning over here. Leanne and I have been chatting a little bit, but welcome. This is our stability module. So I hope that you have had a chance to at least look at your workbook. If you don't have it yet, Conquer has a great workbook in the Conquer module where it says start your Conquer journey, and you click that button, and then you go into all the Conquer steps right below the first video where my face is explaining everything what to do. There's a whole workbook, and here is the cliff notes of what you need to know. And so even if you don't have a chance to watch all the videos, just download the handout, or at least read through the handout yourself, the workbook, so that you can kind of get a gist of what this module contains. But we're going to open with prayer, and then we're going to start with a verse, and then I'm going to give you an illustration, and we're going to go from there. So Father God, I just thank you for every single woman in Conquer. And Lord, those who have just started their Conquer journey this season, maybe because they never did it before, or maybe because they're brand new to Conquer, Lord, I pray that you would help them to take in what they need right now. It's so much material, Lord, that sometimes we can feel overwhelmed, like we can never learn all this. We're not supposed to learn all this. It's like becoming a new Christian and having learned the whole Bible in, a month. You can't. And so it's a lifetime journey of growing and getting stronger, but there are some basics. And so, Father, I just pray that you would help them be good students of the basics, that they would apply the basics to their life, to their attitudes, to their spirit, to their heart, to their bodies, so that they show up in this destructive situation that they're in, this destructive marriage, this divorce that they're going through, the separation they're in, trying to stay well, whatever their goal is, Lord, that you would help them to show up in a way that is godly and mature and strong, especially as their children, if they have them, are watching them. Lord, if there is one destructive person in the family, help there not be two. And so, God, I just pray for each woman who's watching this video today, who's going to watch it later, that you would empower her with everything that you give us to grow into the person you've called us to be. I heard a phrase yesterday that there are trees, oak trees, hiding in acorns. And some of these ladies, Lord, are oak trees, but they've been stuck in an acorn shell. They've never been allowed to plant themselves. They've never been allowed, or they've never taken the step to plant their own selves in the soil of your word and the soil of your truth, Lord. And so I pray that during this talk, this session this morning that we have, that you would just help them build greater stability into their life, emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, and financially. In Jesus' name, amen. So I don't know about you, but stability is an important ingredient for my life. So my grandkids have a slack line. We put a slack line out back, and a slack line is like a 2-inch wad of probably like trampoline material, but it's only 2 inches, like a tightrope almost. And you string it between two trees, and the goal is to be able to walk across this slack line without holding on to anybody. And you need a lot of stability to do that. You need a lot of core strength, because just getting up on that little line, it's not like a balance beam. It doesn't even stay stiff. It wobbles. And so not only does it wobble, but you wobble. And so you need something called core strength in order to stay strong and straight on that slack line. So far, last summer, I could take 3 steps on it. So far this summer, I could only take 2 steps. I can get on it and I can take 1 step forward, and then I fall off. So my goal again this summer is to try to get across this slack line, but I'm gonna have to practice more than I'm practicing right now. And so in order to be stable and strong on a wobbly surface, you've got to have core strength. Well, if we use that metaphor right now, you're in a wobbly surface. You see, what happens out there in life creates a need for something in here in us, right? So when we're on a wobbly surface, whether it's a slack line or we're on uneven terrain, we need more core strength than if we're just walking on sidewalks. And so when life throws us curveballs, like a destructive husband or a special needs child or financial problems. And, we can't fix all that out there, but it challenges something in here in order for us to stay stable in the midst of a crisis, in the midst of a hardship, in the midst of a chronic life problem like difficult and destructive marriage. And so in this module, we're going to be covering what it means to be stable or get stable. Now, stability doesn't necessarily mean strength, but it means stable enough that you can keep walking and you're not collapsing in a heap. The Bible tells us in 2 Timothy 1:7 that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And so we're going to use that verse as our key verse this morning in helping you to put into practice what it means to be stable. Now, in this module of stability, there are 9 videos. There are probably more videos there than you watched. And as I'm looking at all this, I'm thinking, maybe I'm going to revise some of this and make it shorter. I don't know, because you can always go back and watch these. But these are some of the key videos that we think will help you get your stability, your sea legs under you in the midst of uneven terrain in your life. Again, like I said, when something happens on the outside, it shows up something on the inside that needs to be stretched. That's why God tells us in James, consider it all joy whenever on the outside you face trials and tribulations. Why? Because on the inside you are having this opportunity to develop spiritual muscles called perseverance. And perseverance must finish its work so that you can become mature, which is what we've been talking about in Conquer. And so don't be so afraid when the ground gets unstable, because God is using that to help build your core strength. Now, one of the key videos, there's actually 4 of them in this module, is all around this whole idea of building core strength. And some of you asked last week, what is core strength? I've been hearing a lot about core strength. What is core strength? Well, we have a whole course, a whole coaching group on walking in core strength that will start again in September. Leanne will be leading that. I will be leading that with Leanne, and we will walk through that. It's an extra thing besides Conquer for more in-depth coaching. We only take 20 people in that class. But for your benefit right now, we're going to help you understand what the elements are to core strength and some key applications parts to it. Because if you don't have core strength physically, when you are weak in your core, then you can never walk a slack line, but sometimes you can't even walk a hike. Sometimes you can't walk uphill or downhill because you don't have the stability to keep your balance. And that disables you. That keeps you limited. And so if we're going to be physically healthy, especially as we age, you don't want to be all curled up in a ball, or you don't want to have that hunched back look. It's ugly. In the same way, we don't want to be 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 and be hunched over emotionally or mentally, not know what the truth is, not know how to walk in the truth, not know how to manage our emotions. But we're just willy-nilly all over the place, acting out, expressing our emotions in sinful ways. That's not strength. That's not maturity. And even though something out there might be provoking, it might be pushing our buttons, it might be making us feel some feelings that we don't want to feel. This is whatever's happening out here is an opportunity for us to pay attention in here to what we need to develop in order to manage out here. So if I can't walk on my hike like I want to, then I need to develop more muscles, don't I? It's showing me that. It's showing me that I'm weak. There's nothing wrong with the hike. It's me that needs to be fixed. Now, I'm not saying that's true of your marriage. There is things wrong with the marriage. But just like if there's things wrong with a ground and it's all broken up because of, an earthquake or something, I still have to manage to walk through that without falling into the holes. And you do too. You do too. And so we want to talk about core strength. Thanks for being here with me, Leanne. I appreciate it. You want to start with talking about core?
Absolutely. I'm so grateful to be here. Hey, everybody. Glad that you're here with us. And remember, you can post some thoughts that you got from the stability module down below in this feed while we are chatting. And I love core. I think that it has helped me tremendously. And, a year ago, Leslie talked about hiking and slack lines. My personal story is a year ago this week, I jumped out of a perfectly good airplane. I needed stability in order to do that. I jumped tandem, and it's amazing when I think of CORE, because I'm thinking of the jump master that I was attached to. I was totally hooked to him, strapped to him. I had to do my own part. He told me how I had to stretch my core and keep it strong. So I didn't collapse both of us, but I was strapped to him, and I kept thinking about how that resonates with me and my relationship with the Lord and my relationship to other women, and about how my stability was helped even when I was flying like a bird in the air by being strapped to something that was secure and stable. And that's what CORE has been for me as I've been walking through it. There's 4 letters in the word CORE. And, do this with me, because we want this to be an active participation. C.
Oh,
Right? C, woohoo, right? And so make a C with your hand, because I want you to remember how important these are. C is being courageously committed to truth. No more pretending. You know what happens when we close a C? It turns into a P. That's pretending. No more of that. We want to keep it a C, and we want to keep it open, which leads us to the O of CORE. And that is being open to the Holy Spirit and to wise others for input in our life. That's why you're here in Conquer. That's why I'm here. That's why I've trusted Leslie as a mentor and a coach for so many years. And that's why I'm committed to walking with you women, because CORE has changed my life from the inside out. And then we have R. This is R in sign language. Oh, where is it? I guess I'll put it here. This is R in sign language. And so this is a universal R. R is about being responsible for ourselves and being respectful to others, but not losing the respect that we have for ourselves, that self-respect. So they go in tandem. And there I go again. There's my skydive analogy. But respect and honor and responsibility. We talked a lot about in the first module of awakening that we want to be self-aware. And part of that comes in that self-respect and responsible for ourselves. And the last one is E. This is sign language for E. Isn't that interesting? That means there's nothing pointing outward. We want to be empathetic. We want to be empathetic and compassionate with others and ourselves. And we don't want to, the other E is enable the destructive or abusive behavior to continue in our relationships. So I'm going to pause there. C-O. Actually, I think I was wrong. I think this is R. Isn't that interesting? Now that I'm doing it, I think this is R in sign language. Okay, somebody hold me accountable. R and E, because I used to do this with my kids. Yes, it is. C-O-R. We're connected. Respect and responsibility are interlocked. And then E, empathy or enable.
So let's unpack this a little bit more and talk about how this works in a relationship with both yourself. So in Conquer, we're talking about 3 primary relationships, really 4, but 3 primary ones. We're talking about your relationship with yourself. So how do you take responsibility for yourself? We've talked about do your own work, right? Be aware, be self-aware, be compassionate towards yourself. Don't beat yourself up for making mistakes, learn from them. So you're going to start to have this different kind of relationship with yourself, because perhaps you've been so focused on fixing your husband and so focused on what's wrong with him that you've ignored your own growth, your own correction, your own stuff. All right. And so part of Conquer is helping you reorient yourself. You can't fix him. You can't fix his problems. You can care about them, but you can't fix them. All right. Just like you can't fix your kids' problems. You can care about them, but you can't fix them. It's their job to fix them. But you can work on yourself. So that relationship with yourself, your relationship with God, because we can only see ourselves rightly in the light of how God sees us. If we allow ourselves to be defined by other human beings, we're going to get a misunderstanding of who we are. You know, we're not as, if we think about some stars in Hollywood, you know, or stars in sports, Michael Jordan has this new series out on ESPN, and it's supposed to be an amazing series on his life. But sometimes we're not as wonderful as people tell us we are. We're not as wonderful as people think we are. And if we just hear all the wonderful things, oh, you're so hot, or you're so rich, or you're so powerful, or you're so beautiful, or you're so talented, people can start to get a big head like, oh, I'm all that and I don't have any weaknesses. That's not true. That's not walking in the truth. And then sometimes we can start to feel so bad about ourselves because people just beat us up and beat us up that we forget to see the good in ourselves. And so the only person that can truly help us to see ourselves truthfully is God. So we are courageously committed to the truths in core, that very first step. And that means we're going to be honest with ourselves, first and foremost, about ourselves. Right? Not necessarily about everything else, because we don't know everything else. But when we say, search me and know me, Lord, see if there be any hidden fault or hidden way in me. Help me to walk in the truth, Lord. Help me to know the truth. Help me to know the ways I lie to myself. It's not just being truthful that, yes, I'm in a destructive marriage and I need to tell everybody on Facebook. That's not what we're talking about when I'm courageously committed to the truth. In fact, that may be even poor strategy to do that. It may even be harmful to you to do that. So we're not asking you to be truthful with everyone. Be truthful with yourself first, and then be authentic with other people. So if people say, how are things going? You don't say, great, we have a great family life. And you don't post all your wonderful family pictures on Facebook as if your family is all wonderful. You might say, if someone asks, things are hard, pray for us. And you don't have to give them more details. You can have good boundaries on that. But now you're not lying. You're not pretending everything is fine when it's not. So courageously committed to truth takes some courage, doesn't it? It takes some courage to see what really is, both in your own heart, in your relationship with God, and your relationship with a significant person like a husband, or like an adult child, or like an adult parent, maybe that you're struggling with. Right? So we're going to talk about those three relationships: our relationship with ourselves, our relationship with God, our relationship with others, especially this destructive person, and probably our relationship with one another in Conquer, because our relationship struggles come out sometimes even in the feed, right? Even in the feed, we see sometimes we're not taking responsibility for what we've said, or we're not being respectful to others in the way that we respond, or even in the way we talk about our husbands. All right, you can tell the truth about your husband, that he's acting in unbecoming ways or sinful ways, without calling him names, without judging him with pejorative curse words, right? You can do that if you want to, but you have to learn how. And that's part of your work to do that here, to be truthful, but speaking the truth in love. So I'm courageously committed to truth. That's the first step of the core. Anybody have any questions about that step? Anybody have any struggle with that step? I'm going to look at some questions, Leanne, while you talk about that and see if I have any questions on that.
Beautiful. And this is, I love that you brought that up, Leslie. And this is where we have a responsibility and an opportunity, girlfriends, to become the woman that God created us to be, and not to allow all of our situations to, like Leslie says, deform us. We can develop more self-awareness and God awareness as we learn to assume more responsibility and full responsibility, because everything about you matters. And so assuming and owning the responsibility for how and what you think about, what you're feeling, and how it is you're acting out those feelings and thoughts that you have. That's your responsibility. It's nobody else's. And it's really easy to point the finger and say, I'm doing this because of you. Well, we're going to talk about that as we dive deeper into this stability module.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't see any questions, particularly on the C step. So we're going to keep going and explain the 4 steps of core. Then there are some questions about some of the R steps. So we're going to get to that. But so C, you want to take O and explain that one, Leanne?
Sure. Oh, this is all about being open to the Holy Spirit and to wise others. So this is assuming personal responsibility for your own spiritual life as well, and really leaning into God and asking him for wisdom. You know, Leslie brought up that passage, I believe it's in Psalm 139, search me, O God, and know my heart. That takes a lot of courage, my friends, to ask the Lord to search you and know your heart. And then it also goes on to say, reveal the areas in my life that do not honor you. And so, as we are being open to the Holy Spirit, we are kicking aside the fear of pain. Because when we are being open to the Holy Spirit and to wise others, they might be giving us feedback into our life that might be really hard to see. I have a magnifying mirror that I put my makeup on with. I don't know why after age 50 I decided to buy one of those, but it shows every single flaw and every little tiny hair that I should be tweezing. It shows everything, nothing hides. And we need to remember nothing is hidden from God. The Holy Spirit, God our Father, sees it all anyway. So we may as well be open to Him, to allow Him to refine us, and open to wise others to give us feedback and input into our lives. You know, we can be motivated by the fear, or we can be motivated by love. And so as we're thinking about this O in core strength about being open to the Holy Spirit, we have an opportunity to reflect on the stories that we're telling ourselves. We have an opportunity to look and see and ask the Holy Spirit what will nourish us and cultivate growth within us. Psalm 119, if you have it, open it up. Go to verse 124 through 134. Somebody posted in the feed. It's a really beautiful place to look and see about receiving and owning that whole spot about being open. And so, you know, we talked a lot about this last week, right? Be open to see a bigger picture, and the Holy Spirit will give that to you, and wise others will as well. So I'm going to pause there, Leslie, and take a drink and take it from here.
Yeah, so here's a story. I may have told this in other classes. I don't think I've ever told it in Conquer, but I belong to a group. We call ourselves the Spa Sisters. And so Pam Farrell and Liz Curtis Higgs and Dee Bresden, I'm trying to think of Gary Meacham, other, you know, Georgia Schaefer, just a bunch of speakers and authors of all different, you know, all women, Carol Kent. We go to Texas once a year in January, and we don't wear our makeup. We don't take any pictures. We don't talk business. We just, it's not really a spa. It's an old ranch. So, but we take walks. We have exercise in the barn. We take bike rides. We have some nourishment in terms of teaching one another some stuff. And it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing to have these spa sisters that know what your life is like, to be on the road and be speaking and be up front all the time. And one of the things they do when we first get there is they make us weigh ourselves, and that we don't have to tell anybody, but we have to see it ourselves. And they also do our blood work, and we don't have to tell anybody what our results are, but we have to see it ourselves, because what they're asking us to do, ask ourselves is, are you taking care of yourself as a steward of God's gifts in you? Are you taking care of yourself? Well, here's some wise others who are going to show you the truth about whether you are or not. And every year we can kind of compare our results of, you know, is our cholesterol going up? Is our sugars going up? Are we gaining weight? We have to do a cardio thing so that we can measure our oxygen. It's kind of humbling. And so that's one truth teller. So we need wise truth tellers in our life, because sometimes we can lie to ourselves, like, I'm not gaining weight. I don't feel, and then we step on the scale and, oh my gosh, there's the truth teller. It tells us right there. Or so here's a funny story. So we were at this event, as you know, the whole week, and it's in the middle of, you know, it's not in Houston. It's about 2 hours. It's in Round Top, where, you know, Joanna Gaines goes to get all of her, you know, antiques when she does her show. And it's in a cute little town called Round Top, but it's very rural. And so the electricity went out in the house that we were staying in the night before we were to leave, to come home, to get to the airport. It's a 2-hour ride from Round Top to Houston Airport. So we have a shuttle that comes and picks us up, and then we get in the shuttle and go to the airport. Well, Georgia, my friend Georgia, you know Georgia, she comes banging on my door at 5 o'clock in the morning, the big headlamp on her head. I'll never forget. She goes, Leslie, there's no electricity. We have to get up, and we had to get to the shuttle by 6:30 or something. It's pitch black out there. No, I have a squirrel crawling on my roof. No lights. How do you get dressed when you can't even see your hand? Well, you use your cell phone, right? So we all turned on our flashlights on our cell phone. We're all trying to get ready. We're all trying to find our clothes in this dark, pitch black house. We're trying to pack our suitcases. No lights. No mirrors. We can't see what we're doing. We get on the shuttle. It's dark in the shuttle. Drive 2 hours. By the time we get to the Houston airport, it's like 8 o'clock and we can see ourselves. Oh my gosh, we looked hilarious. I mean, Carol Kent's shirt was on inside out. Her sister had 2 big rosy cheeks on because she put her blush on, but she didn't see that she didn't rub it in. I mean, we just howled, and all of us, as soon as we got to the airport, we ran to the bathroom so we could fix our hair, put our makeup on right. Because without wise others, lights, mirrors, scales, wise people in our lives, the Bible, we can't see ourselves clearly. Right? We can't see it. And this is one of the things I talk about in this webinar that you probably signed up with Conquer with. High performers are willing to look at the replay. Every sports figure who's worth his or her salt, whether they're a gymnast, whether they're a soccer player, whether they're a football player, whether they're an athlete in the Olympics, are looking at the replay of their performance. They're looking at what they did right, and they're looking at what they did wrong. And so we need people in our lives that can help us see ourselves, our gifts and our strengths. I would have never done this ministry. I would have never written a book. I would have never been a speaker or a teacher if people hadn't come alongside in my life and said, Leslie, God has anointed you in this way. God has given you a gift. Like, really? Like, I didn't see it. They saw it in me. And as they spoke it over me, I could begin to see it myself, right? And so it's not just the bad stuff that we see the good stuff. It's not just the hairs and the boogers that we see when we look in the mirror that we don't like about ourselves, but it's some of the good things that we see or that other people see that we don't see, that they speak into our lives about the good things that God has put in us, the talents and the wisdom and the gifts and the insights and the abilities to serve him and glorify him that you might not see. And so this step is really important, because to be open is to be in Conquer. To be open is to be at this class. To be open is to read your Bible and say, Lord, teach me, show me. To be open is to ask for feedback from your Conquer sisters. To be open is to participate in this community so that you can learn from others. And this is a very important part of growth. And you see, if you are married to a destructive person, the exact opposite. They are closed. They are not open to learning new things. They do not want to hear what you have to say. They do not want to hear what's wrong with them or the marriage. They are not open. And that is a sign of instability. That is a sign of being unhealthy. And so in order to be healthy, we want to be courageously committed to the truth, and we want to be open to learning that truth from wise others, because we can't know all truth by ourselves. Leanne, take it off.
Okay, R is about, here it is. Remember, it's this one, not this one. That's X. This is R. Oh my word, we're just keeping it real.
I don't know sign language.
I mean, it totally just came to me.
This would be like an enemy.
Yeah, right. I just kept it. I just in the moment. I'm just in the moment. Trust in the spirit, being open. So here we are. We're all about R, and R is about being responsible for ourselves. Let's just break it up just a little bit. Responsible for ourselves. What does that mean? You're in Conquer for a reason. You signed up for Conquer because you realize that maybe you weren't as stable as you wanted to be. Yeah, you're taking responsibility for yourself. So congratulations. You've let go of some of the apathy that you could have by taking responsibility for yourselves. And we're going to walk alongside you as you do that. So you want to think about R. You want to stop waiting for somebody else to fix your story, to make it all better, to make it all nicey, to make it all go away. Because nobody's going to do your work for you except for you. And that's a really hard pill to swallow sometimes, because we're like, but it's you, if it wasn't for you doing this, I wouldn't be acting the way that I do. I'm going to challenge you. How true is that really? Out of the overflow of the mouth, God's word says, the heart speaks. And it's not just our husbands or our kiddos or our family members, whoever it is that we're in a dysfunctional relationship, that the overflow of their heart, their mouth is speaking, it's ours too. And so we want to remember that we have an opportunity, responsibility, and ladies, a privilege to steward our own lives. We get to do that. It's a gift from God that he's given us. And so taking responsibility for ourselves is an honor. and it's a right and it's a privilege. And so we want to remember that part. We want to focus on our personal growth from the inside out. Your health and well-being is your responsibility. You know, Leslie was talking about her spa girl time. You know, every woman that stepped on that scale was responsible for what they put into their mouth, what they drank, what they ate, how much they exercised. It's all up to you. Nobody is going to force you to do that. You get to make those choices. And we're going to talk a lot about where those big choices come from a little bit later. But we want to be able to focus on our growth. And we want to, the other part of taking responsibility is to take responsibility for what we're thinking about and the emotions that we're letting give us information and either hold us hostage and hijack us or propel us to move forward into healing. We don't have to act from all of those emotions and cravings, right? We get to take responsibility for them. We get to own them, be open to that feedback, and then decide how it is that we're going to walk those out. So what about this other part of our R? What about the other part? Being respectful toward ourselves and others. And boy, being respectful to others when they have mistreated us, betrayed us, abandoned us, rejected us, when they shame or blame us, is super hard. I just want to say that. It's super hard. It takes an incredible amount of resolve and self-respect in order to give respect back, sometimes when it's not deserved at all.
I love how you say that, Leanne, and I really want you guys to write that down, because when you behave dishonorably, you shame yourself, right? And so when you treat someone dishonorably, it's not a badge of honor to do that. It's dishonoring to them. It's dishonoring to you. And so we don't treat someone as they deserve. All right. This is the biblical mandate of grace. We don't treat someone as they deserve to be treated, because if you treated your husband as he deserves to be treated, you would hit him over the head with a frying pan. You would punch him in the nose, and maybe in his mind, he would do the same to you. Right? Because people upset us, people disappoint us, people don't do what we want them to do all the time. So you don't treat people as they deserve. You treat people the way that you want to be treated, as Jesus says. And you also treat people the way that God calls you to treat them, because they are created in his image. They may be acting dishonorably. They may be acting disrespectfully. Let's just put it in the context of your children. Your children may be acting dishonorably. They may be throwing a temper tantrum. They may be mouthing off to you. But when you talk to them you have boundaries, you have discipline. You may not talk to me that way. That's not allowed. I will not listen. Those are fine words to say. You're respecting them. You're talking to them in respectful ways versus slapping them across the face or calling them morons or telling them that they're going to, you know where. Right? Those are dishonoring ways of treating people. You're dishonoring the very image of God in them. And that is not your place. And that is putting you as judge over someone. And I'm hoping that because you're here, that's not who you want to be. And we're going to talk about that in just a second at the conclusion of CORE, your big circle. Lots of people want to know what that means. And so it's really important, if you want to gain stability, that you take responsibility for you. What comes out of your mouth, how you handle situations, how you respond to adversity, how you handle people you don't like and don't respect. I mean, if I met pretty much any politician these days, other than maybe Mike Pence, but most of them I don't personally admire. So let's switch the word out for admire to respect. I don't personally admire, both on the Democratic side and the Republican side, very many politicians today. Maybe you don't either. But if I were to meet one of them, I would treat them with respect, not because I admire them, not because I respect their policies, but because that's who I am. That's who I am. And I want to be honorable to people, even if they're dishonorable. I want to be honorable to myself. And that's part of the strength. You have a lot of strength when you have self-control, not to react to someone, but to respond in that strength of who you want to be versus how they made me feel, right? Okay, go ahead, Len. I'm sorry.
No, that's so good. And I love the word responsibility. And if you break it up and flip it around, you have the ability to respond. You can respond instead of react. Remember how we talked about reacting is a very fear-based way of showing up in the world if we come in reactionary mode. But if we come in response, we're more motivated by love. And we're able to push the pause button just a little bit. We've talked a lot about that. Push it. It's super helpful in order to do that. And so, yeah, it's just key that we're able to do that. And I love how you shared, Leslie, about respecting the image of God in every human being, no matter who they are. They are a child of the creator of the universe. He had a purpose for their life too, just like he did for yours.
Yeah, and let me just stop because there's a couple questions right on this step. So let me just kind of clarify. So here's one. I feel like I'm contradicting myself because I feel as though I'm being pushed or provoked into reacting, and therefore saying the same thing that I'm actually therefore saying the same thing. I'm acting the way I am because of him. But yet I'm not allowing him to say the same thing or have the same freedom to act the way he acts because of me. I blame him and I don't allow him to blame me. I don't say those things to him, but I feel it inside of me. And you are absolutely right. There is a contradiction here, right? And so you are contradicting yourself. And I think this is what happens. Here's where Sparrow tends to be. So Sparrow's our community manager, and she will kind of corral some of you who are being a little dicey on the Conquer page towards your husbands. We've had some husbands being called some pretty nasty words. All right. And that your husband might be a scoundrel. He might be doing scoundrelly things. I'm not saying that's not true. What I'm saying is I want you to describe his behavior and not condemn his personhood. All right. That's being respectful toward others. I don't like some of the politicians' behaviors on both sides, but they are still God's image bearer. And I'm going to talk to them, even truthfully talk to them in respectful language and not as if I'm judging and condemning them. We hear all this in the political realm. It's ugly, it's nasty, and it doesn't bring any healing. So what this woman is saying, in all honesty and transparency, and I so appreciate you because you're self-aware, I'm blaming my husband for the way I treat him because he provokes me. So I'm calling him a you know what, or I'm pushing him, or I'm skipping him the silent treatment for 2 weeks because of the way he treated me. And yet if he said the same to you, well, I'm doing the same thing to you. I'm blowing up at you, or I'm punching the walls because you make me so mad. Would that be acceptable? No. And this is where we go back to taking responsibility for you. Here's the truth of it. Life is aggravating. There are tons of button pushers in your life, whether they be computers that don't work right. Those push my buttons. And sometimes if I were not in core strength, what I'd like to do or feel like doing in the moment is just taking my computer and going, I'm so mad at you, right? I don't do that because then I would be sorry that I caused some damage, and the computer's not making me do that. The computer is aggravating me for sure. My children, I'm babysitting my grandchildren. Do they aggravate me sometimes? Yes. Last night, they took showers. I told them to put the towels in the hampers. The towels are wet towels are all over the floor. I said, hey, I thought we talked about putting these towels in the hamper, but I could have said other things, right? I could have said other things. So do people aggravate you? Do you aggravate your husband? Do you push his buttons sometimes? And we're going to talk about not intentionally provoking someone. That's not kind. But do you do it sometimes? Probably. Does he do it to you sometimes? Probably. Who's responsible for managing that reaction? Him? So, and I've used this metaphor before, this analogy. If you were just driving peacefully, minding your own business, and you were cut off by a crazy driver, and as he cuts you off and you kind of have this reaction and you give him a dirty look, he gives you the finger, and now you're really mad because he's now provoked you, cut you off, gave you the finger, how dare him, and you just in a fit of anger crash your car into his. And then the police come and say, well, he gave me the finger. He provoked me. Yes. And who's responsible to handle themselves when they're provoked? So what's happening outside is definitely wrong, for sure. But what it's saying to you is, I'm not strong enough to know how to handle that yet. I'm not strong enough to know how to deal with that in a godly way. I've got some things to learn versus you have to change. They're not going to change. People are going to provoke you. People are going to aggravate you. Computers are going to aggravate me. I have to learn to be strong enough to not react to that in a sinful way. That's my responsibility. So yes, you are contradicting yourself to answer this person's question, because if you're being pushed to react, so if I'm mocking you, oh, you're just a baby. Yeah, see, now you're crying. What's wrong with you? Oh, you're just a mama's girl. It's probably because you were abused in the past. All right, so someone's provoking you to just boom, or say something ugly, right? They're provoking you. What can you do? You don't have to just sit there and get provoked. You can say to yourself, this is self-awareness, I'm getting provoked. He's pushing my buttons. I better go take care of me. I'm going to take responsibility for myself and go take care of me so that I don't explode on him. And I've used this analogy in our core strength coaching class. So I'll use it here for you. If you were in the same exact situation and he was saying all those pokey things to you and provoking you, whatever he's going to do, and you had a bellyache and you knew that you were about to vomit or poop all over yourself, what would you do? You wouldn't just sit there and let it happen. I know you wouldn't. You would take responsibility for yourself and you would say, I can't talk about this anymore. I got to go to the bathroom. That's what you would say. You would take responsibility for you and you'd go do your business, not publicly. So if you're about to vomit or poop all over yourself verbally, then go take care of yourself. Go take a time out, go take a walk, go journal in your journal. Do what you need to do to calm yourself down. That's part of being mature, right? Not just allowing yourself to do whatever your body's going to do without you taking care of yourself that way. You would dishonor yourself that way if you just exploded in vomit all over yourself. You would dishonor yourself if you just pooped in your pants because you didn't take time to go to the toilet, right? In the same way, if you're having emotional vomit come out, you dishonored yourself by doing that. You've dishonored the other person as well. And now you blame them because you didn't take care of yourself to get your time out and have a boundary. I'm done with this conversation. I'm not listening to this anymore. I've got to go take care of me before I explode.
So important. I remember just some instances in my own life where I'm done with this conversation said to me, and I've said it back, and I thought, oh, that's so disrespectful. And what I've learned is that's probably one of the kindest things that we can do before we do start vomiting. Returning evil for evil is not God's plan for you. That is not his best for you. And learning to self-manage, self-soothe, and take care of thyself is our responsibility. I've got a little Fitbit here that I wear, and some days, ladies, I am walking 15,000 steps because I need to take care of me. If stuff is spinning in my household, I'll just get out, go for a walk, go for a hike. That's my preferred, is get out in the mountains, put my feet on the dirt. And that's really okay to take a time out. It's really healthy.
It would be crucial. And wouldn't you love it? And let's reverse it. What if your husband was starting to get provoked and he knew because he got violent or he got scary that he was starting to feel that way? And he said, I can't talk anymore. I got to go take care of me because I don't want to vomit on you. I hope you'd be grateful. I hope you'd be grateful that he's going to take care of himself, because all of us have limits. Like, you can only hold your poop so long and then it's going to come out, right? We all have limits. You can only hold that vomit down so long and it's going to come out, right? You can only hold some of that tension so long. It's not like we're asking you to be inhuman. You're human. You have limitations. If you are in a bad place, take care of you. You don't have to stay in this conversation. And the other person eventually will be grateful that you didn't dishonor both of you by exploding all over them.
Well, and guess what happens when we do that? We don't have to do a lot of extra apologizing when we're taking care of ourselves, when we're respecting ourselves and respecting others. Not that we don't want to apologize for when we are wronging someone, we do. We want to own that. But man, if we choose not to vomit or poop all over somebody, we don't have to clean that up. I would rather put it in the toilet where it belongs than to clean it up, because our words, you've maybe all heard the analogy. Once your words are like toothpaste leaving a tube, that once you squeeze it out, you can't force it back in again. And I would much rather not have to apologize later for my misbehavior, even though I do. And it's hard and it's humbling and it's all of that. But if we take that time to have self-respect, to know that that is not the woman that God created me to be, that's not the woman I want to be. I don't want to be the one who throws up or poops all over somebody.
And here's one other just strategic thing. So we're talking about all kinds of personal values and spiritual principles, but let's just talk strategy because I'm a strategist as well. So this became crystal clear to me when I was having one of my meltdowns with my teenage son. So this is over 25 years ago that I learned the beginnings of taking responsibility for myself, because teenage sons can have a mouth and they can provoke. And I was physically abused by my mother. And one of the ways she physically abused me a lot was slapping me really hard across the face. One time she did so hard that my face went through the window of the back door because the momentum just went so far. So I always vowed that I would never do that with my kids. I would never slap their face, no matter what they said. I just wouldn't do that. So my son was provoking me with his mouth, and I wanted to slap him. And I didn't, but I said some things that I shouldn't have said in a fit of anger, just reacted. And so here's what happens. So he's being sinful to me. And so I'm being sinful back. And this is what he says. So Mom, you're the Christian counselor. You're the spiritual one. You're the one who's supposed to be mature. And you're expecting me to handle my stuff when you can't handle yours? And he was absolutely right. And so what happens strategically, when I wrote this book, How to Act Right When Your Spouse Acts Wrong, okay, it's my second book before all the emotionally destructive stuff came out, but I referenced some of this stuff. So what happens when they act wrong and then you act wrong? All they have eyes for is they're wrong. You're wrong. All they have eyes. My son couldn't see what he did to provoke me. All he could see was that I was a bad mom in that moment. That's all he could see. And so when you can contain yourself, and I'm not saying placate it and say, oh, you're talking to me wonderful. I would say, I can't hear you when you talk to me that way. I just can't listen when you talk to me that way. I would have a broken record kind of technique, or I would say conversation's over because I've told you I can't listen when you talk to me that way. I said, instead of reacting, I would respond appropriately with a good boundary, but I didn't let myself just get pushed and pushed and pushed till I acted sinfully. And then they can say, I didn't do anything wrong. I was just trying to talk to you and you just go off, right? And now they can't see what they did wrong. And so when you can act appropriately, when they're acting sinfully, it makes their sinful stuff look more sinful. It makes their provoking behavior more obvious. It makes their covert abuse more transparent. And that's the only chance you have of having them see what they're doing, is for them to see it plain. But when you mix your stuff in with their stuff, that's why Christian counselors have such a hard time because they see your stuff and they see his stuff and they're saying, you both have stuff. And we both do. We all do. His stuff may be much more destructive and much more of a pattern and much more blind and all those kind of things. But when you add your stuff to the mix, especially in front of your kids, they're going to hold you both responsible, maybe you more responsible. And so another strategic reason why you need to learn one of the fruit of the Spirit, which is self-control. Take responsibility for yourself when you're starting to lose control. bodily functions or emotional functions, and go take care of you so that you don't dishonor yourself.
And that just calls us up to be wise women. Wisdom doesn't come naturally, sin does. And so asking the Lord for wisdom during these real challenging times. And when things are a little calmer.
Leanne, I'm gonna go plug in my computer. It seems like my computer's running out of juice. So keep going. I'll be right back.
Okay. I just wanted to say that, like I said, wisdom doesn't come naturally. Foolishness and sin does. And so we have to step out of that natural space and ask God for the supernatural. Ask the Lord to give us wisdom. Proverbs 9:1-6. You can go in there, seek wisdom and pursue wisdom and ask the Lord to bring it in so you are able to learn to respond. And so when you think about your significant other, your spouse who's being ungodly, sinful, maybe dishonorable, maybe deceitful, maybe they're behaving in ways toward us that we just want to pay them back. Ladies, that's responding out of anger. That's responding out of tremendous amount of fear. And when we start assuming personal responsibility for ourselves, we're able to let some of that go. There's not as much room for apathy or anger when we're taking that personal responsibility. This R step of core is such a big one. It has been life-changing for me because, in many areas, I could be very reactionary to my husband, and I was totally responding or reacting back at him the way he was reacting toward me. And I was expecting more out of him than I was even being willing to bring to the table. Anybody else? That was a big thing for me. And to realize that I was not showing up in the loving way that I even wanted him to show up with me was extremely humbling. Yeah, somebody said putting ourselves in timeout. Do it. I need a timeout. I often say with my grandkids, I'll say, we need a redo. Let's do a redo. And sometime for me to get a redo, I need to give myself a timeout so I can even think through what that redo might be. So I hope that was a little bit helpful to you.
All right. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I'm looking at the feed. You ladies are rich. You are rich with information.
Good. I love when you share with one another. And our theme in Conquer this year is we grow stronger together. So that's one of the benefits of being on this Facebook page and sharing with one another, because where some of you struggle, others have strengths. Others have strengths where others struggle. And so it's just so neat to see how you can help and encourage one another. That's that open to wise others.
It is. That's why I love standing here. Well, we're in two different zip codes right now, but Leslie and I standing here being stronger together. So we are more able to just flood love and respect into each one of you. Somebody just put in the feed, I love this. Emotionally vomiting in my journal is a good way for me to respond because then I can be truthful with myself. What a great strategy.
And also, yeah, and you also, so we'll give you some words on how to be truthful to your husband when you need to, but doing it in a respectful way. So, you don't have to, you don't have to give false admiration. Oh, you're wonderful and I love you when he's not and you don't. I'm not saying that, but it is important when you speak the truth. Hey, our marriage is dying. All right, that you speak it in a respectful way. And that takes work for some of us to learn how to do that because we never grew up with watching that happen. And we don't do that naturally. We just spout off whatever we feel without really putting it together with our big circle, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So we just want to finish the core teaching. I want to talk about big circle quickly, and then we're going to get to your questions. So the E step, you want to take that, Leah?
Sure. The E step is all about being empathic and compassionate to others without enabling, there's our E, without enabling them to continue abuse or neglect or betrayal, kind of whatever that sin issue is that's coming in for you. And again, we're going to go back to that whole idea of replacing a reaction with a response and having our boundaries. And the empathy piece is where some of our boundaries come into play. And so when we think about, I'm curious to ask the ladies, when you think about the word empathy, what comes up for you? Because it's very different than sympathy. Empathy is when you actually take a moment to walk in somebody else's shoes. I heard empathy described in a podcast this week, that if you are empathetic, see what you think, see if this resonates with you. Leslie, I'd be real curious to hear your thought on this. And I can't remember, ladies, I'm sorry, what podcast. I'm a podcast kind of junkie. And so I can't remember exactly who said it, but they said that empathy is sending a card 1 week prior to Mother's Day to your friend who lost their mom this year, saying, I know that this year is going to be hard for you. I just want you to know I'm thinking about you and praying for you during this time, a week beforehand, rather than saying, I know this is the day of, hey, this is pretty hard for you, isn't it? And so it's thinking ahead, it's planning ahead, it is feeling on the inside of you what is happening in somebody else's world. And I thought that was a beautiful picture of empathy. And I hadn't thought about that. And it was really humbling for me when I heard that, because I thought, wow, have I ever truly exercised that part of empathy within myself? You know, in Proverbs,
I think this is really hard when we feel empathy, because the next step is we want to fix it for someone. We feel their pain. And so we want to sort of fix what's wrong. And this is really where we have to be wise so that we don't enable them to think that there are no consequences to their behavior. And I think it's easiest for us to first start this thought with our children. I mean, we can be empathetic even when we're spanking them. Like, oh, I remember when I got spanked, and I don't want to do it too hard, but I do need to spank my kids because they need to learn. Or if you spank or punish them, you know, you have empathy of what that feels like as a little kid to be, you know, banned to your room for timeout or whatever it is. But that you still, so you can be compassionate, empathetic. You know, I know you want to watch that movie, or I know you wanted to go to that party, or I know you wanted to go outside, but you made some bad decisions and now you have to sit in your room, right? So we can be empathetic and caring for their distress without feeling like we have to fix their distress. In fact, sometimes their distress is an important thing for them to feel so that they don't keep doing the bad behavior over and over again, right? For our children. But the same would be for our husbands. Now, we can't punish our husbands like we punish our children, but even the consequences. No, I wish I felt like having sex with you, but I don't, because when you scream at me and call me horrible names, why would I want to kiss you? Well, you don't understand how lonely I feel. Well, I can imagine how lonely you feel. I feel lonely too. But why would I want to be with someone who, for the most part, thinks I'm stupid and fat and ugly and a bad mother and a bad wife? That sounds craziness to me. So you can be totally honest and still be empathetic that he's in pain, because you know you're in pain too.
well, there's such a sadness there. And it's okay to own that sadness. And it's okay. Part of empathy too is being sad for them. I remember the first time that I started to realize that my husband couldn't get it. We talk a lot about, I've watched the feed this week, and it's like, I just wish he would get it. I just wish he would understand. And that was something that I really had to wrestle with in my own life. And it was like, you know what? He's just not going to get it. And I am very sad that he is in that space where he can't see it. And I grieve for him because he's missing a really big piece of what God could have for him and what God could have for our marriage. And that was something I had to just really step into and lean into that space and be sad for even some of the blindness. You know, there was, like we talked last week about the Vaseline covering their lens, that it's very hard for them to clean that off. And that grieves my heart when somebody can't see the full potential that is within them and see the godliness that the Lord just wants to flood into their life. And yeah, the other part of empathy is it prevents us from being abusive back if we can step into the being more empathetic. And then it also gives us courage to have those boundaries. You know, I tell my grandkids, if they get whiny, I said, Grammy has really funny ears, I can't hear that. That's empathy for them. It's not shaming them saying you can't whine at grandma's house. No, it's like, I have really funny ears. I can't hear that. And I know you know how to use your words. Just a small example.
These are great ways of saying things. And so this takes us to a part of us that I want you to be aware of. And we're going to spend time, we talk a lot about this big circle concept, but what I want you to do is I want you to draw a big circle on your notepad. So just a great big circle like that. And then we're going to draw 2 smaller circles like that. Okay. And so what I want you to put in here is I want you to put in your virtues and values. So this is called your big circle. And these are your small circles. And it's stupid names, but when I was a counselor in my practice, I would draw this out for people all the time. And we would just say this circle, this circle. So I've always just called them your circles. So it's not the best term, but it's what we've used and I've always used it. So that's how those names came. So here's what happens in our culture. We're only aware of these 2 circles. And sometimes we're not even aware of this. Our thoughts and our feelings. So the T would be for thoughts and F would be for feelings. Okay. And we're only aware of those 2 circles. We're aware of what we're thinking, but we're not always aware of what we're thinking because we're not even aware that we're thinking lies. We're not even aware that we're thinking things that aren't true. We think that just because we think it, it's true, but it's not. So what's the part of you that reflects on this? Same with feelings. Just because we feel something doesn't make it true. Sometimes I feel old and frumpy and fat and I might as well just quit my ministry and I'm too old to do this. And I feel that way. I'm thinking those thoughts, but I know that's not true. It's just a mood I'm in. We all get in these cranky, depressed moods, maybe more so even with this COVID stuff. So just because we feel something, sometimes you feel like you don't like your kid at that moment, or you don't like your husband, and maybe you don't, but most of the time your feelings for at least your kids come back more positive, right? So we have these feelings, and if we're not aware of them, if we're not paying attention to them, they can sometimes become all of what we are. That's our identity, but that's not true. It's just what we think and what we feel. The person that evaluates what we think and what we feel is what we call our big circle. Okay, this is you. And you have thoughts and you have feelings, but you are not your thoughts. And here's where it's important for you to name your virtues and your values. What is important to you as a person? Because it's different. Like my virtues and values might be a little different than Leanne's virtues and values. They might be different than your husband's virtues and values. So if his virtues and values are, I always want to be right, and I always want to be first, and I want to make a lot of money, and those are my values. That's what's most important to me. Well, that might be very different from someone who's most important to them to be loving and kind and honest and faithful, right? So what's most important to you? And I want you to write them here. So for me, one of my virtues is it's important for me to be open and gracious and humble. Those are important attributes to me. And they've been more important as the more notoriety I've gotten, because I've seen my colleagues let their egos get the best of them, and it can trash your ministry. We see it all over the place. When you think you're above reproach, when you think you know it all, when you're not teachable. So I've really prayed that's an important value, that I'm teachable, that I'm open, that I'm humble, that I don't think I'm better than anybody else. And I try to really work on that, because I don't admire that, and I don't value that. I find that reprehensible when I talk to some of my colleagues and they're all full of themselves and they think that, they're God's gift to humanity. That's unappealing to me. That's who I am. So when I feel my little ego get wounded and I'm feeling insecure and I'm feeling like I, didn't get enough attention at the publicity booth at the Christian Booksellers Association, when I'm having those feelings and those thoughts, which is human, how do I deal with that? Like Paul said, I don't want to do some of these things. I don't want to feel some of these things, right? And so this is our powerhouse here. When we become aware of who we are, our virtues and our values, when we have feelings that don't line up, we're not in alignment with them. I'm not in alignment with those jealous, ugly ego feelings that I'm having, and those ugly, jealous ego thoughts that I'm having. I don't want to have those feelings. I don't want to have those thoughts. Just like Paul in Romans 7, I don't want to do what I do, and I don't want to think what I think. All right. So where is that part of you? It's this part of you. So you see, this is not your identity. These are just your thoughts and your feelings. This is where your identity comes. I am a woman of strength and dignity. I am a woman who values honesty in her relationships. I am a woman who, whoever that is for you, start to write that out. What are your values? What are the virtues that you want to aspire to as a person? That will help you not react out of these places, but respond from here. And you need core strength to build this up. So I would encourage you in the feed to start to write down your values and virtues, or start to take note of that. Like, what's most important to me? If having good family life is most important to me, then when I'm crabby and miserable, for me to just vomit all over everybody is contradicting my core values. It's dishonoring me. I'm out of alignment with who I am. Or if my core value is to be honest and faithful, and I'm flirting with my neighbor or having an affair with my coworker, I'm out of alignment with who I say I want to be. It might feel good in the moment, but it's not who I want to be as a person. And that's your work to do. Nobody can do that for you but you. Anything you want to add to that big circle, Leanne?
No, I think it's so good. And the big circle, girlfriends, is something that you get to develop with the Lord as you co-create your steps forward from today forward with the Lord. You get to develop that circle. And I want you to just expand and pray and ask the Lord, because we've been given a lot of labels over time. And perhaps our destructive person in our life, whether it be our spouse, our kiddos, our parent, whoever, has put a lot of Post-it notes all over us, and we forget.
You are bad. You are stupid. You are, no, you're not. This is who you are, right? This is
and so reclaiming your core identity is part of your work to do. And some people have asked, how did you take a personal inventory? It was using the big circle. It was looking at the core of who I wanted to be and taking responsibility for that woman. And so if one of my core values, or one of the virtues that I want to really aspire to, is dignity, I really taken that passage of scripture incredibly personally, that I am clothed with strength and dignity. If I claim strength and dignity as a core value, a virtue, a character quality that is going to define Leanne and frame her life, would a woman who is walking in dignity poop all over her husband? Would she throw up all over? Is that dignified? For me, it's maybe different for everybody, and that's okay. You're at your own space. But for me, that does not represent dignity to me. And that's the beautiful thing about the uniqueness and individuality that we all have. How we define our core values, our big circle, is up to us.
And here's
what does loving mean to you? What does dignity and strength mean to you? And that's where, discussing this in and amongst the group could be super helpful, because we're going to help each other see parts of that character we may not be able to see on our own.
And here's where writing your story becomes different. Okay. So if something happens on the outside, you lose your job, your husband divorces you, you divorce your husband, whatever. All right. It's going to stir up a lot of thoughts and feelings, right? Because my computer freezes, it stirs up a lot of thoughts and feelings, right? Whatever happens, life happens, and we have a lot of thoughts and feelings about them. But if I'm going to write my story about how that's going to play out, if I write it from this place, I just react to what happens. I just react to what happens. I just react to what happens. Then actually the story gets written by my circumstances. But if I decide how I'm going to handle what happened, then I get to write the story. So I don't smash the computer. I learn more computer skills so that I know how to handle certain things, so I don't get as easily frustrated. So now I'm growing in strength and dignity, because that's the person I want to be. And now, instead of getting so frustrated by the computer, I know what to do when it starts to happen, and then I can fix it, right? So now I'm growing in my strength to handle life situations, because that's who I want to be. I don't want to be just a victim of life circumstances, but I want to be able to handle them out of that strength. And so these are the things that we're trying to teach you in core, and stability in this module is part of the beginnings of this. All right. I mean, we do 3-month and 6-month classes just on this and applying this into your life. So don't put this pressure on yourself. Oh my gosh, I never heard this before. I don't do this. Don't be empathetic toward yourself. All right. Be empathetic and compassionate toward yourself. So if you went to a foreign country and you didn't know the language, you wouldn't expect yourself to have fluent conversations in a week. You just wouldn't. All right. So don't expect yourself to have fluent conversations or fluent ability in all of this stuff. I've been working on this for my own life for a long, long time. And so we're just giving you the skeleton of it so that you can begin to say, okay, I see where I want to go. Here's where I am. Here's where I want to go. I don't have to let this marriage decide my story, because even if this marriage doesn't make it, I'm going to get stronger and more dignified and more beautiful and more honest and whatever your values are and your virtues through this experience. Therefore, I don't have to be so afraid of the pain. It's like going to plastic surgery. If you're going to go for plastic surgery, there's going to be pain, but you're not thinking about the pain. You're thinking about the results, right? If you're going to the gym, you're not thinking about the pain. You're thinking about the results, right? There is pain, but there's growth on that side of it. And so begin to see that growth. That's what we're trying to paint a picture for. So what I'd like to do now is go to questions, because we got a lot of them. All right.
I want to share one thought that came in the feed that I think is very powerful. Our big circle doesn't require change from anybody else. It does not.
All right. So here's a question. When I'm responsible for my own reactions, my husband becomes even more irresponsible. I feel like I stuff every emotion down. So there's a contradiction. All right. If you're responsible for yourself, then stuffing them down isn't helping you, obviously. Right. So that's not a healthy response to whatever's happening. How do I deal with these years of emotions? How do I deal with years of these emotions? So my thought would be, you need to vomit. Like if you're constipated, you need to take a laxative, right? Because it makes you feel sick if you're constipated. We were in Germany this year and I was terribly constipated. I got to find a drugstore. I have something because I can't keep eating or walking anymore. I just feel awful. When you're constipated, full of negative emotions, it feels that same way. You're just stuffed full of them. So you need to give yourself permission to take a laxative. But if you do take a laxative, you want to hang out in a place that's safe. Like you don't want to take a laxative and then go take a tour on tour bus, right? Because you're going to be in trouble then. You're going to dishonor yourself. So if you're going to take a laxative, whether that means you're going to start journaling, whether that means you're going to start reading some books to prompt your feelings, whether that means you're going to hire a coach or a counselor to help you dig some of that out, you're going to do something to start getting clear, because you can't be free if you're all stopped up. And so you want to honor your emotions, but you've not honored them. You've not taken responsibility by them by stuffing them up. All right. So you're not making your husband more irresponsible. It just is irresponsible. But you've got to be responsible for you, because you can't even express your emotions constructively until you can figure out what they are. And when you're constipated, full of a bunch of old emotions, and then you've got new emotions coming in on top of that, it gets all mixed up. And so you need some time for you to clarify what's really bothering you and what's going on inside. So journal, and if you need some extra help, reach out for that.
It takes strength to reach out for help, and it's healing to reach out for help.
In trying to take responsibility for myself by leaving the room when my husband gets nutty, when the conversation gets nutty, my husband demands I come back and listen to him instead of walking away. What and how do you handle the raised voice that demands this? Any thoughts?
Well, you get to set a boundary right there. You have an opportunity, sister, to set a boundary and say, you know what? I'm not going to allow myself to be spoken to that way. How you choose to speak to me that's all on you. If that's the man you want to be, I mean, you got to be careful how you say this, but in your head and in your heart, if that's the man that he wants to be, are you being the woman that you want to be by receiving that type of treatment? And if not, it's okay to walk away. It's okay to say, And this is where that self-respect comes in. I have too much self-respect to be spoken to in that tone or with those words.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, but I can't be part of that conversation.
Yeah, and I think you can just say that when he demands that you come back and listen, I think you can just say, I can't listen when you talk to me that way. I can't listen well. All I want to do is run away from you. So if you can figure out how to calm down, then maybe I can listen, but I can't listen. Just like Leanne saying, my ears won't let me listen to whiny, right? I think it's okay for you to say, I can't listen well. I can sit there. I can't listen well. And so here's respecting him. I want to listen to your concerns, but when you spew them out with venom, I can't listen well. So let's take a time out, or I'm taking a time out because I can't listen well when you're screaming at me. All right.
And that's just a stress response too. I mean, physically, what we know about cells in our body, we can't hear.
Yeah.
We're not even going to be able to digest what it is they want to tell us.
You're just in self-protective fight or flight mode. So
There's that brain thing, and there's videos on this in this module about the brain. It's amazing what happens. So it's really okay. If you have a science husband, you can just say, hey, you know what? Science says.
My brain can't handle being screamed at. Yeah, I can't listen well when I'm being screamed at. All right. I've been working on my responses to my husband's behavior, but now we're at a point where we are so detached that there is no relationship at all. Since he clearly doesn't see his behavior and we have no relationship now as that is the only way to deal with it, would you consider this staying well? Can you speak to this? I don't know enough to answer whether I would consider this staying well. I think it might be helpful. Again, you can initiate a conversation where you can say, hey, how are things going for you? I'm not liking this arrangement. Do you want to talk about that? I think you can, even though you're detached, doesn't mean you can't have conversation. It'd be like living with a roommate that you're saying, do you want to still be roommates? I mean, you can live with a roommate peaceably and not be best friends for sure, right? As long as each of you are respecting each other's boundaries and are sharing in the responsibilities of the care of and maintenance of the home, even if you don't have the best friend relationship. So I think there's conversations that you could begin to initiate about where you want to go from here. So we're not fighting anymore. That's good. But we're also not talking and we're not fixing anything. So what do you want to do? And you're beginning to invite his big circle to think about that, even if he has a big circle. What's important to you? What are your values? Is it important to you to try to solve this? Or are you okay with just sitting on the couch watching TV and me sitting in the bedroom knitting? And that's our life for the rest of the next 25 years? Is that what you want? That's not what I want. And I think you can begin to have those conversations without getting attached to the outcome. And we talk about this in Conquer a lot. Don't be attached to the outcome, because when we get attached to the outcome, then we get anxious and trying to control the outcome. You don't know what he's going to respond, and you don't know what's going to happen. But I do think you can initiate some steps toward facilitating more communication about that.
Yeah, and that just helps you every time you do that. It's risky when you invite in conversation, but that helps you to develop core strength when you do that.
How do you try to re-enter a conversation after you've taken a timeout? Things have gone unaddressed, unresolved for years. Any thoughts, Leanne?
Well, first, I just want to implore you and encourage you to be really, before you re-enter a conversation, be really clear on what your wants, your needs, your desires, and your motivations are. Check yourself before you even enter into a conversation and invite dialogue. Check and make sure that you've sought the Lord for wisdom, for understanding, that you put that magnifying mirror in front of yourself to say, am I ready to interact in a way that honors my big circle? That would be step one. And then, have the courage to do that, and then be willing to accept their no. And that's a really hard space, because as we do our work, ladies, we're going to be, talk about out of alignment. You do this for a second. We're in alignment, we're kind of walking along, and then we start doing our work, and it's like, oh my goodness. And we get really excited about doing all of our work, and we want them to be right up, with us, and that they've done their work too. Well, sometimes that's not happening. and we can get super excited and we can expect them to respond to us in a way that shows that they're doing work. But if they're not, it's going to be very hard to have the type of conversation that is reciprocal that you want to have. Are you ready for that? Are you having inner boundaries in and of yourself that's going to allow you to remain stable and not wobble under that pressure if he doesn't respond in the way that you want?
And just more practically and strategically. So I would say if you leave a conversation because of emotional volatility, or you're about to poop your pants or whatever we've used as a metaphor, you can say something like, I'm taking a timeout for 30 minutes if you want to re-enter and talk about this, if you want to. So I think part of the problem with some of these conversations is they're really not about a specific problem. All right. They're just arguing about who's right and who's wrong. So I wouldn't go back to that kind of conversation. But if there is an issue that you have to discuss, like, are we going to take this job, or are we going to send our kids to a Christian school, or are we going to buy a new car right now? And the conversation has gotten volatile, or are we going to repair this marriage, or are we going to get a divorce? All right. Those would be very specific conversations that you want to have. I think if it's not going well, to be able to say, you know what, here's where it's really important that you take responsibility for yourself instead of trying to control him. I'm not managing myself very well right now. I'm getting anxious, or I'm getting angry, or I don't want to say the wrong thing. So I need a 30-minute timeout, or I need to stop this conversation now and go to sleep. We can pick this back up again, whatever, tomorrow at dinner, this weekend, so that you're anchoring, when you leave the conversation, you're anchoring it back to a place where you're willing to talk about that, and you'll take responsibility for initiating it. So when I used to do marriage counseling, working with couples, and we would negotiate this timeout kind of thing, whoever calls the timeout also has to reinitiate the re-engagement of discussing on this problem when both of you are at a better place. So if you say, hey, I'm just flooded right now, I can't hear anymore, I can't talk anymore, it's getting too volatile, it's getting too confusing, whatever it is. And you don't have to say, you're crazy making, you're being covert. You don't have to start attacking him. You can just say, I can't do this anymore. I'm getting too confused. I'm tempted to lose my temper. I don't want to go there. I'm taking a time out. All right. When you talk about you, he's going to be much less defensive than when you talk about him. You're doing this, you're doing that, you're being this, you're being that. He's going to argue with you about that. If you just talk about you, it's harder to argue with you about that. I'm taking a time out. I need a break. Just like if you said, hey, I'm not feeling well, I got to go to the toilet. It's hard to argue with that. You got to go, right? And so just talk about you. I'm not handling this well. I got to go. But I'm willing to re-engage tomorrow when I'm feeling better, or when we're cooled off, or whatever. All right. So you can initiate that re-engagement and do it. The next day you can say, if you still want to talk about the car, or you still want to talk about our relationship, or you still want to talk about, what we were talking about yesterday, porn controls on the computer, I'm ready. But then Leanne's right. Be ready to talk about it. The problem with a lot of these men, if you look at the video on toxic shame in the stability module, is that a lot of men, again, a lot of us are unhealthy. We're all unhealthy, and we don't handle things really well. And we didn't grow up with families who taught us how to handle things well. And for men, their identity is geared around their performance. Our identity as a feminine person, usually our identity is geared around our connection, our ability to connect, our ability to maintain good relationships. So if we're a good mom and we're a good wife and we have friends and all that, we tend to feel better about ourselves. If we're not so great at a housekeeper, or we're not so great at a cook, we can kind of live with that if we have really good connections, right? Whereas men, their sense of self comes around their competency. Not so much their connections. And so when we as women question their competency, and my husband will be the same way, like, are you sure you know where you're going? Like, what do you think? You don't know anything? I don't really. Like, why don't we stop and ask directions before GPSs? I'm not asking for directions. Don't you think I can figure it out? I mean, when we question their competency, they can get very defensive and very shamed. And I talk a lot about this in my book. And they have a lot of toxic shame, like I should be competent at everything as a man. Just like you guys have a lot of toxic shame about failure in relationships. I should be a better mother. My kids don't love, all of that. And it's unhealthy, but we don't know how to deal with it. So here's where we can have empathy and compassion for our husband's toxic shame. They don't want to hear that they're not competent at something because it makes them feel horrible. I can never do anything right, if you've heard that phrase. All right. So they avoid it. That's their go-to mechanism. If I don't look at the elephant, if I don't think about the leaky toilet, if I don't think about the marriage falling apart, if I don't look at it, then it's not there. And that's a very common coping strategy for unhealthy people. If I don't think about it, I don't look at it, and I don't face it, then it'll go away. Like if I don't face the lump in my breast, it won't be there tomorrow. It's just not true. It's a strategy to cope with the anxiety and the shame. That doesn't mean you should collude with it. Don't collude with it. But it means that you can be compassionate for it and structure your speech more strategically so that you can address that. I know it's hard for you to hear that, we still have this problem, but we still do have this problem. And I'd like to try to fix it if we can.
Yeah, and it's hard to be a grown-up. This is
grown up.
It really is. This is taking our maturity to a completely different level.
And inviting him to maturity.
Inviting him to join you in that.
Right. And he may, and most likely he may not, because again, he won't look at himself. But I think as you do your part, I would say that is the only chance, not if you do everything right, but if you do your part, including setting boundaries and implementing consequences. If you do your part, that is the only chance of your marriage making it in a good way. You might stay legally married, but that is the only chance. And I've been doing this a long, long time. And the men who have woken up have only woken up because their wife woke up and she wouldn't collude and pretend anymore, but she was gracious enough in the way she did it that she didn't drive him away. Now, some men left. I'm not saying every woman got it, but the men who finally woke up did it because of the strength and the dignity of their wife. All right. Is it possible that a relationship can get to the point of no return? Probably. I'm not going to be naive enough to say that every relationship is reconcilable. I think that, and this is too long to discuss, but I think, our call is to forgive people. I don't know that we have a relationship with everybody, but given enough maturity and given enough time to test and trust and see, maybe a relationship can be repaired, but it takes a long, long time. And most of the time we're too immature to suffer through the consequences. So I've been invited to write a chapter on a book. I would love your input on some of this for a counseling book on Reformed theology and counseling practices, best practices. And I am writing the chapter on the church. I'm not writing the theological part, but I'm writing about the practical part, which I got a lot to say there. So it's a wonderful opportunity, but it's a lot of pressure too, because it's a more academic kind of book. But anyway, what is the church's responsibility here when, or what does the church teach when a relationship is broken? And they teach basically, well, just, pretend and act as if it's not broken, or, give it a couple weeks to rebuild trust, but it takes a long time to rebuild broken trust. So some relationships probably in this lifetime, you won't be able to restore broken trust. Can you be civil to each other? Can you be kind to each other? Can you be respectful to each other? Yeah, I think you can. So if you end up getting divorced, can you show up at the same place for a grandkid's birthday party? You could, if you both got mature and got healthier. You could. Could you ever trust him not to cheat on you again? Probably not, right? So it may not be workable in terms of a marriage, but that's why Jesus gives us that exception clause. Sometimes people do irreparable harm to a marriage, and divorce is the result of that irreparable harm. That doesn't mean that they have to become a full-fledged person that you can never have any contact with. Sometimes there are very dangerous people that you can never have any contact with again because they are dangerous and you shouldn't have any contact with them, nor should your children. Okay, so I hope that answers that. When I say those things, I can't do this, I need a timeout, I'm not handling it well, his response is generally, that's the problem. You can never do this. How would you respond to that, Leanne?
Oh my. You know, one of your teachings back, and I can't remember what video it was in, but you gave some of the best advice that really helped me. And it was to own my own stuff, right? And say, you know what, I have a problem. I have a problem. I can't receive that feedback from you right now. And that's my work to do. And again, a timeout might be really helpful. But I think there's something very, very beautiful. Just like we want our husbands to own our stuff, they want us to own ours. They see stuff in us. They see our blind spots that we're not going to see. And I think as we model, just like we do for our kiddos, as we model that humble spirit, that vulnerability, oftentimes that can be attractive. It can be extremely threatening to them, but it can be attractive too. And I know for me, by saying I have a problem and I'm working on my problem.
And what if you said, when he said, that's the problem, you can never do this. And I might say, you're right. I can't do this, nor do I want to. This meaning arguing, fighting, calling names, tempers raised. I don't want to live like this. So if you want to have a relationship like this with someone, it's not going to be me, because I can't do this. So I think it'd be really helpful to define this, because in his mind, he's thinking you can't have any old conversation. But I don't hear you saying that. I hear you saying, I can't do this kind of conversation. And maybe that's not clear enough to him what this looks like. And not only can you not do it, you don't want to do it, and you're not going to do it. Right?
Yeah, and sometimes
so I think those are really important things for you to say. Let's define what I can't do, or probably more honestly, what I don't want to do anymore. I don't want to fight with you round and round. I don't want to argue with you because you don't listen to anything anybody has to say. You're always right. Why would I put my 2 cents in when you don't want to hear me? This is what I don't want to do anymore.
You know, and defining the it and the this, and doing that and inviting them into that conversation, that gives them, ladies, an opportunity to take responsibility for their own thoughts and their own self.
Yeah, and I think
help define the this or the it.
Right, certain destructive so if he wanted to do a sexual practice that you didn't like, right, and you were not liking it at all, I hope you would stick up for yourself and say, I don't want to do this like that. Well, you never want to have sex. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying I won't do that. I'm saying I won't do this. So there's where you need to be really clear and specific, and not let him make it all about, oh, you're a bad wife, or you're a damaged person because you won't do this. I won't argue and fight, or I won't eat sushi. I don't want it. Whatever it is, this has to be clear. And I don't hear that being clear enough for him, or for you maybe. Okay.
You know, another thing you could say to that is, I saw it in the feed when he says, I can't do this. I need a timeout. I'm not handling this well. I love that. That takes a lot of courage to say that, and say, you know, at this particular moment, what I have said oftentimes is I'm not prepared to have that conversation right now. Maybe later, let's table it for another time.
And I think this next question goes into this. When conversations about simple matters repeatedly turn into a circle, and you know you are not feeling strong enough to circle around, how do you not engage in conversation though you are deemed uninterested? You are deemed or defined probably as uninterested, unforgiving, unloving, or for disengaging.
Yeah, so good. You know, Leslie likes diagrams. I do too. So sometimes I found it really helpful to make a start on your paper. And so at the top up here, you're going to write where the cycle starts, for you. So if you kind of keep going in this circle space, identify what's in the circle, and then figure out where you want to put the stopper, where you want to have your changed behavior. Well, there you go. Within that circle, you get to decide what behavior, if it's honoring your big circle. And so these cycles that we can get in, we can call it the crazy cycle. We can call it all kinds of the downward spiral, whatever, but we get to decide when we're really conscious and we're working on ourselves where it is that we want to stop that and say, you know what, this conversation can't go any further. And it's, oh, again, it's okay to just humbly say, I am not prepared to have that conversation.
And I think
I think the big thing, we don't want to get so worn down. Sorry, Leslie, I interrupted you.
Right, go ahead.
We don't want to get so worn down that we start reacting back to them and we start abusing back with our tongue, our thoughts. And we got to be really careful of the stories that we're telling ourselves in our minds and not beating ourselves up, but really taking the time that we need so we can operate out of that big circle, so we can operate in core.
Yeah, and so here's again, I'll be Miss Practical here. Here's a couple things you could say to him. I can't function in the way that we have conversations because you don't seem to want to slow down and give me a chance to respond. So it doesn't really feel like a conversation. It feels like a lecture. You know, and husbands might say this too, that we go on and on and on and on and on, and they never know exactly what we're talking about because we've got 15 things on the table, right? So there's so much on the table. What do you pick up and talk about? Because you did this and your mother did that and the kids did this. And it's like, oh, I'm overwhelmed. So I think you can offer some opportunity to have a conversation about something in a very specific way. So for example, you could say, all right, so if you want to talk about our sex life, or okay, if you want to talk about your mother, okay, if you want to talk about whether the kids are going to the Christian school, or okay, if you want to talk about our marriage and whether or not we're going to have sex, I'm willing to have a conversation with you, but I'm only willing to do it if we can do it differently than we've done it in the past. What do you mean? Well, I'd be willing to do it with a timer so that you can talk for a minute and I can talk for a minute, or you can talk for 2 minutes and then I can talk for 2 minutes so that we get equal time and talking. Or I'm willing to do it in writing so that you can talk and then I can respond and I can talk and you can read it and we can calm things down and slow things down so that each of us can have time to listen. So I'm willing to do it in those ways, but I'm not willing to do it in the ways that we've been doing it, because the ways that we've been doing it are hurtful to me and I don't see that they're making any progress for our marriage. So those would be ways that you can offer some forward moving solutions. And this will tell you something. Is he open to wise others? Is he willing? Is he really wanting to talk about it? Or does he just want to beat you up because you won't let him do it his crazy way, right? And it'll give you information. So those are the ways strategically and practically that you can talk about things, even to say, hey, we don't seem to be able to talk about things very peaceably. And I'm not willing to go through this again, especially in front of the children. If we want to talk about anything right now, for however long it takes us to kind of get in a better space, is I'd rather do it through email or through text. And so have some documentation then, have things in writing, have things calm down so that you can respond to him and he can think about what you say and vice versa. And again, you don't want to send 100 texts every day. So you might say, hey, I'm not willing to do that anymore. It's taking up too much of my time and it's still crazy making. I'm willing to do 2 emails a day. So you, again, can have boundaries of what I am willing to do, what I'm not willing to do, what I can accept, what I can't accept. And that requires you to define that. Nobody else can define that but you, about what you will do and what you won't do. All right?
Yeah, and that's part of our work to do, is really defining that for ourselves. That's knowing what you need and what you want, and then being able to communicate that in a clear way. Because I know with my husband, he wants to, like, just give me the facts. I don't want all the nilly-willy, touchy-feely. That's what I hear all the time. He didn't want to hear all that. And so the more clear I am and the more direct I am, the better. Just like I'm giving all this nilly-willy stuff, Leslie's like, here's the strategy. I mean, that's why we're better together, right? It's like, yeah, I can bring all the feely stuff. And Leslie's like, well, this is how you put it into practice, ladies. This is where the meat is. And it's super important. And so when we know what it is we want, how we want to be treated, then it clears, it brings clarity, and clarity brings stability. It does.
Yeah. So here's a good question. I got so worn out until I left. I can't go back. He says, I have to be all in or all out. So he's putting a boundary down. So I say, I'm out, and we'll divorce him. It's got to the point where I hate him. Is hate a valid reason to divorce? So you're asking a couple different questions, but we'll just start with hate. So if we think about what Jesus says, so here's taking care of you. It has nothing to do with your marriage or your relationship. When you're filled with hatred, we just watched with my grandkids the Star Wars series. So it's particularly poignant in my mind now. If you've watched the Star Wars series, the third one in the beginning series, the Vengeance of the Sixth or whatever it is, the Revenge of the Sith, where Darth Vader becomes Darth Vader, if you've watched the series. So Darth Vader was a good guy. He was a good character. He was a Jedi Knight, and he got filled with hate and anger, and he became evil. And so Jesus knows this. That's why he says, do not allow yourself to become overcome with evil. Overcome evil with good. So hate, I mean, we can hate certain things, we can hate certain sins, but when we let ourselves hate people,
Oh, I think Leslie might have locked up. Did you lock up, Leslie? I lost you. I think you might have locked up. When we allow ourselves to hate people, we invite in sin. I don't know if that's what you were going to say. You locked up there for a bit.
are we lost?
Oh, there you're
Oh,
back.
am I back?
You're back.
Am I back? Okay. I don't know what's going on. So we had the Ethernet, but I'm out in the country, so it could happen. But anyway, so when Jesus says love your enemy, he's not asking you to be married to him, but he's asking you to deal with that hatred in your heart. So no, hate is not a good thing to nourish in your heart.
Well, and it provides, I think when we invite in hate, that's a huge stronghold that Satan would love to use to put wedges where wedges were never designed to uphold or separate. And it's dangerous. Hate is very powerful. And I think it invites in, you get to decide in your big circle, are you wanting to be a woman who hates? And if that's part of your big circle, okay, then, reconcile that between you and the Lord, but pray and ask God for wisdom in that.
So how do you respond when you bring a grievance to your husband and he says, he feels I am blaming him? He says he's open to hearing my feelings, but not blame. He's not a very good communicator, but how can I begin to gain clarity in this type of conversation? So I would ask you to check your wording. This is, again, a practical kind of thing. If you start your sentences with you a lot, you failed this, you didn't do that, you messed up this, you said this, you did this, you didn't do that, it can sound blaming. It can sound blaming, right? And so I think if you talk about you instead of him, like, so let's say that he missed a car payment, all right? You missed a car payment. You didn't check the balance in the checkbook. He's going to hear that as blame, right? What you can say if you're strategic and that's going to happen and it's going to go nowhere, be more strategic and say, I see that the car payment wasn't paid and that makes me anxious. All right.
Okay.
And then he can say, oh, I forgot, and then you can say, well, this seems to be a pattern that is happening over time. What can we do to fix this? So that's a very more constructive conversation on solving a problem. The car's payment's not getting paid versus attacking a person for failing to pay the car payment. So I think that there can be ways that we can talk that invite more cooperation from people. And so there are things at times that we do that can shut people down. Just picture yourself. Let's say that you're in Bible study and you're in a women's Bible studies. We're not talking about any destructive relationships, or you're in Conquer and you're sharing something and somebody says something like, well, that was stupid. Or, you didn't do it. Why did you let him back home? That was stupid. And one of your Conquer sisters says something like that. What's that going to do to you? That's going to make you less likely to open up again, right? It's going to make you more, I don't know. I don't want to get slammed. I don't want to get my hand slapped. I don't want to get my mouth slapped, right? So we can do that to one another. That shuts us down, that it doesn't make it safe to talk about things, right? And so as much as it depends on us, we can't make them feel safe. We can't, it's not our responsibility to make them be safe, but it's our responsibility how we deliver something. Just like when a doctor comes in and says the patient died. All right, the patient's dead. He can't fix that. But he can come in a kind, empathetic way and deliver some bad news, or he can come in a crass, uncaring way. Your father died. You didn't get him to the hospital in time. Why'd you wait so long? I mean, those are cruel words, right? Those are horrible words. Like, it's your fault he died, right? How does that feel? So I do think that we're responsible for the way we deliver bad news. Our marriage is dead. How are you going to deliver that news? I hate you. You're a failure as a man. You're a failure as a husband. Or I don't know how to live with you. I don't even want to do the things you want me to do. I don't want to watch porn with you. And I don't want to be with someone who thinks it's okay to do that. That's up to you. You have your own big circle. I have my own big circle. You don't have to use those words, but I'm using them for you right now. But I can't do that. I can't live with someone I can't trust. I don't want to be afraid of someone I live with. That's not healthy for either one of us. That's a very different conversation than you are a perverted man who's narcissistic and covert abusive and you're awful. So you decide how you want to deliver bad news. But I think each of us are responsible for the way we use our tongue, and that the words we say are powerful. Just like people's words are powerful to us, our words are powerful to them. And so you can't fix your husband's shutdownness, but you can invite him to be more open. Just like in Conquer, we're careful in the conversation here because we don't want you to be shut down. We don't want you to be shut down by others' mistakes that we don't even realize we're making them. I've said stupid things on the Conquer feed, and somebody says, I can't believe you said that, Leslie. And I'll go back and say, oh my gosh, I was rushing. I was not careful with my words. I was too fast. I was responding too quickly, and it sounded curt or harsh or insensitive. And we can all do that. We're all need to be open to that and learn how we can have an anointed tongue, how we can speak the truth in love, even delivering bad news like, hey, I don't think our marriage is going to make it. I think it's dead. And I am sad for that, but I can't do this anymore. It's a very different delivery.
Well, that's where when you invite in that compassion and empathy piece.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me just see if there's something else about, because these are the more conversations here. Let's see. So I'm not going to answer this, but I'm going to list the question. Please go deeper. Why do I react with complex post-traumatic stress disorder? Is that my fault or my husband's? I tell him I react because of 25 years of mistreatment, but then I am blaming him. But it is real and it is true. Okay. So if you have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which I talk about and which is very common in abusive situations, whose responsibility to get help for that is it? It's yours. Okay. So for you to use as an excuse, just like if your husband came back from war and he had post-traumatic stress, and because of that, he was, taking drugs or flipping out or doing things because of his trauma wounds, you would say, go get help. This is affecting our relationship, right? So you have to get help for you so that you can re-regulate yourself. Now, whether or not you can live with him or not, I don't know, because if he's the source of the trauma and he's the source of all that, maybe you can't. And maybe that's also another hard decision that you make. But if you're now using that as an excuse to act out, or you're acting out and you're saying, well, it's not my fault because you caused this, it's sort of like saying, I'm going to be a victim now and I get to punish you because you victimized me. And so now I get this power over you to victimize you. And that's not healthy for your marriage. It's not healthy for you. So if you have a disorder, even if it's someone else's fault, if someone raped you, all right, and now you have an anxiety disorder, or you have a traumatic stress disorder because you were raped, whose responsibility now is that to get you well? Yours. Do you want to hang out with the rapist? No. That's fine. Have a good boundary there. But whose responsibility is it to get well? It's yours. It's your work to do. Unfair? Yes, but it's your work to do. Same as if someone hit me with a car. You know, they were reckless. They were texting and I got hit by a car and I've got 2 broken legs and a crushed skull. Whose responsibility is it for me to get well? Mine. I've got to go to therapy. I've got to do the work. I've got to go to intensive care. I've got to go to the hospital. I've got to take the medication. Not because it's fair, but because it is. That's the truth. It is. This is where I am. And if I want to get better, I have to do my work. So if you have complex post-traumatic stress disorder, if that's been diagnosed, then go to a trauma specialist who can help you deal with that so that you're not reacting over again. And if he's doing things that are still continually traumatizing you, then why are you still there? Right? That's your work to do too. Right? You can't live in an environment where you're continually afraid and under duress and not be traumatized. So then why are you still there? That's what we've talked about in our safety plan. You've got to take care of you. Any thoughts, Leanne?
No, it's so good. I just echo everything that you're saying. I feel like I've, got the bobbing head over here. And yeah, take care of you. And just remember that it is not weak to ask for help or get the support that you need. That's exercising core strength.
Mm-hmm.
That's stepping in and taking personal responsibility for yourself.
As I'm working on core, it feels like I'm neglecting my husband. How do I handle this?
Oh yeah, there's that overing piece. We can What makes you think that you're neglecting?
Mm-hmm.
What about, and what is it that you feel like you're neglecting would be a great question.
Yeah. So here's the when you're used to doing something a certain way, like if you've been over-functioning, Leanne calls it overing. If you've been over-functioning, meeting your husband's needs, like he needs you to be with him all the time, and he needs you to talk to him all the time, and he needs you to comfort him all the time, and he needs you to be available sexually all the time, whatever his needs are, right? And now that you're taking some time to take care of you, you're not as overing anymore, and he's feeling neglected. I think you can just own that. I think you can say, I've realized, just like you might with your children, I've spent way too much time thinking about your needs and not enough time thinking about my needs. And I need to get stronger and I need to get healthier. And so I need to take some time to work on me. And maybe you can go find a friend, or you can go do some other things, or maybe part of our work is that you've been too dependent on me and I've let that happen to meet all of your needs, and I can't meet all of your needs. I'm learning that I am just one person and I'm not your savior. And so if you're lonely, maybe you need to have some additional friends, or if you're bored, you need to think about what you want to do with yourself instead of always depending on me to fix that. And I don't know what the details are, but I think that's part of you learning core strength and beginning to apply it in this relationship. Let's see.
Can I just, while you're reading, ladies, you're a work in progress. Don't expect to have all of this, just because you read it, to have it soak in and do it. And, sometimes the situations in our lives are opportunities for us to practice what it is that we're learning. And just remember, it's a process, and be gracious and kind to yourself as you're learning and growing, and reach out for the love and support. We're here to offer that up to you. And do that for each other.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer 2 more questions and then we're going to have to run. Does anybody know of a program like Conquer, but for men? I do not. But Chris Moles has a different kind of program for men. It's not so much on the whole maturity part, but there is a program for men who have been abusive men. So you might want to check out. It's Chris Moles, CHRISMOLES.org. And then here's another one. Husband has insecurities. While I was at the park with a girlfriend, he texted requesting a selfie of us so he could put a face with a name. I sent one, but is there a good response? As I grow stronger, he's behaving like a needy 4-year-old, and I'm really struggling to mother him so that his needs are fulfilled. Help! So first of all, mothering a husband is a lose-lose position. All right. So please get yourself out of that mother role. Right? Because Nobody wants to sleep with their son, and no son wants to sleep with their mother, and no grown man wants to have a mother hovering. That's disrespectful to him, his manhood. So he may need it as the insecure 4-year-old and hate it as the adult man. And it puts you in a horrible position as a woman and a wife. So here's what you need to say. I'm going to be the practical one so we can close this. There's a lot of inner work that you may have to do before you can say this. All right. So you can't always say these things until you do your work. That's why I'm so clear with you on, hey, you've got some work to do, because it takes some strength. And we're going to be offering a people pleasing class in a couple of weeks. Some of you already know about that, and that may help you really do some of that inner work. But you can't fix his insecurities. Those are his. And no amount of loving him and reassuring him and taking care of him will fix, because that's his work to do. It's like trying to say, I'm going to fix your trauma. I can't fix your trauma. I can give you some ideas as a trauma therapist, if that's what my therapy role was in your life, but I can't fix it for you. You have to fix it. You have to do the work. He has to do some work. You can't do that for him. So here's what you come in. You come in with empathy and compassion. I see that you're feeling very insecure whenever I have a friend. I see that it threatens you, or it scares you that I enjoy other people's company, however you would put words to it. I enjoy other people's company besides yours. And I don't know how to fix that for you. I don't know how to fix that for you. I think it's normal that I have girlfriends and still want to be married to my husband. I think it's normal that I like to go to a dinner or go to the park with my friend and still be married. I don't know why this bothers you. So don't even try to figure it out. Don't try to psychoanalyze him. Don't try to be his counselor. Don't try to be his mother. I would say this to my own children. I don't know why you feel this way. Maybe you need to get some help, because I don't want to get into that role. I don't want to get into the fixer role for them. So I don't know why you're so insecure, but I know I can't fix that for you. I can love you. I can have compassion on that, but I don't want to be stuck having to send you selfies and be on the phone with you every time I'm with my friend, because that puts a damper on my relationship with my friend, that I'm always trying to make sure you're okay, and I can't be free to be my girlfriend at that moment. So I'm not going to do that anymore. And I'm sorry that this triggers stuff for you. I hope you get some help for that. Now it's his problem. You can be compassionate about his problem, but it's his problem to have and to fix, not yours. So don't take it as you got to mommy him. That is not your job, and it will backfire 100-fold. He will become more childlike and you will become more angry, and then he will become angry, and now you're both angry and you don't even know why. Don't do it. All right. Anything else you want to say in closing, Leanne?
No, that's
I'm running out of charge of my phone. I'm running out of charge of my
I know, it's so good. I just want to challenge you. Don't let evil and hate turn you ugly. You're beautiful, sisters. And so, spend some time and work on your big circle, establish that and put it in the feed. And if you need some help thinking about what could go in your big circle, ask your sisters. What are you doing? What's in your big circle? It may spur you on. That's why we're here together.
And one other strategy, I'm more of strategy today, I guess today, but one other strategy is write it in the present tense. I am a woman of strength and dignity. I am a child of God. I am fully loved. And now may not feel that way. You might not feel like when Gideon was called by God, he said, you are a mighty warrior. He didn't say you will be. You see, the acorn is an oak tree. It's just not mature yet. You are an oak tree acorn. You just have to finish your work. I am. Be who you are, and write it in the present tense. So it becomes much more powerful than I hope to be someday a woman of strength and dignity. Don't write it that way. It's too nebulous. I am. And then every day at the end of the day, say, how did I do? Did I live in my big circle? And where I failed or fell down, which we all do, how can I learn from that? What can I do differently next time? Those things, those questions, and those times of self-reflection will pay big dividends if you do them regularly. All right.
And I just want to say, write it down. Don't just think about it. Don't just look at the big circle page in the handout and think what you could write in that
journal.
space.
Write it down. See all the stuff I write down, ladies? Oh, my thoughts and stuff.
Me too. Yeah, actually let your voice, let your identity be put on paper and see it, speak it out loud. If you have to, stand in front of the mirror. I am a woman clothed in strength and dignity.
Yeah. Yeah. So next week we will continue our module on strengthening, which is more of the same, a little deeper, a little bigger on how to become a woman of strength and dignity. And again, I want to just echo what Leanne's saying. Some of you, I was not raised in a healthy family. When I started really digging deep into what God said about being mentally and emotionally healthy, I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much richness here. But I felt like I had moved to France and I didn't know how to speak French. I mean, it was so foreign to me. And so now, of course, I've been doing this for 35, 40 years. But if you're just starting, please, please, please be compassionate and empathetic on yourself. Don't start beating yourself. I should have learned this 20 years. Why didn't I? No, you didn't. And sometimes we just don't because we can't. And now we can. Now we've got the bandwidth, or God has brought us to this place to learn. And so wrap your arms around it and embrace it. But you can only take in so much where it actually becomes real to you. Just like the Bible, you can only take in so much and do it. And so just take one piece of this, maybe your big circle. Maybe it's I'm going to be responsible for myself and just take better care of myself. Take one piece and write in the feed what action step you're going to take this week to be practicing the stability module. One piece of it, not everything. Maybe it's just calling for a trauma therapist because you realize you have PTSD. One thing. What are you going to do? What's one action step you're going to take to move yourself forward on this stability module? All right. And put it in the feed and we'll check in with you later. All right. Take care. Thanks for being with us. God bless. Bye-bye. Bye, Leanne. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I've got to figure out how to close this.
Hit that leave meeting button.
You know what? There's another button in front of it. And hold on, I got to get that out of the way. Okay. There we go. Bye.
Bye.